Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to iPen Podcast, interviews and conversations with myself, Nanette Buchanan, and my host, guest host, partner in crime. She hates when I say it, but she knows it's true. We do this every Monday night at 6:30. And what we do is we want to promote the community. We want to promote the people in the community, and we want to talk about what they're doing for the community. That includes authors, that includes producers, that includes people that are in entertainment industry. It also includes those that are just in the community helping the kids, those that are helping the community, helping the homeless, those that are helping schools. We want to talk about the community, and authors write about the community. So that's our main focus, getting it out there. So I want to welcome you, but I also want to invite you, just in case you want to be inspired by the show, share your inspiration and share what you do. I want to invite you to the podcast. You can contact me at ipendesigns@gmail.com and be a part of our show, as well as iPen Magazine. We do ads, articles, and subscriptions. We're looking for your subscriptions so that you can keep in touch with the people that you've seen on our show. Tonight, we have a very special writer, very, very, very different writer. For those of you that like fiction, for those of you that like, well, let's not talk about him. Why talk about him? Let's talk about Felice first. Hey, Felice, come on.
Yay!
How are you, my dear?
I am super fantastic. Happy again to be here on a Monday. You know, these weeks are like flying by.
Yes, they are. You know what? I do not understand how we got here.
Yeah.
You know, from
We're
the
almost
concept of
already.
saying we're back, and the concept of saying, hey, you know, let's do this again and see how it works. This is a whole new avenue, and I'm enjoying the journey. I'm
Well, you
enjoying
know
it.
what? Me too. And thank you once again, Nanette, for allowing me to be your partner in crime.
And for those of you that don't know, we say partner in crime because it seems like every week, if there's a storm in Texas, that's where Felice is from. If there's a storm in Texas, lights go out and everything. And then the next thing you know, she's okay. And then there's something going on here. So we just want you to know that she's the one that does it. She causes these
It
problems.
is all my fault. But look, I'm all official once again. Look, my background is back. All of the stuff.
Got everything ready this week.
So
Well,
maybe
this
we're a little
week,
less criminals this week.
a little less criminal.
Yeah,
Well, you
a
know what?
little
This
less
week I
criminal.
need you to be a little more criminal because
Oh well, you know, I will
we're
do my
bringing
best.
somebody on that goes into some things that we can't explain.
Yeah.
He
I'm
goes into
super.
things that we can't explain, some of the
Yeah.
things that we kind of cringe at
Yeah.
and kind of go, well, what's up? And
Yeah.
he changed my whole mind, Felice, about Dracula. I used
Oh,
to be like a Dracula lover, you know, because
mhm.
I thought he had the suave on everything. Let me bite your neck. Of course you can. You know, I was all in. But then I met Mr. Van Patten.
Okay. Well, then let me meet him too because I am really excited to know this person and kind of
Yeah,
get behind there and
his
see
stuff kind of
what.
makes you wonder, does
Yes.
Dracula know what's going on? There's a whole different view of what horror, thrills, and chills is. So I'm going to bring him to the stage right now. Bringing
Yeah.
him, today's guest is author extraordinaire, Mr. Stephen Van Patten. Welcome to our show,
Yay!
sir.
Thank you. Oh my goodness,
Welcome.
so good to see you both. I feel a little left out since I don't have an IPN back. All I got is like
Well,
paintings and stuff.
That's okay.
But you know,
you're special because you get your own
oh,
background
thank
and
you.
all of that. So you are super special.
Thank
So
you. No, I appreciate that.
And you
welcome.
got your own cup and got his own
And
cup.
I sure do.
does it have Texas on the bottom?
What's that?
Does it have Texas on the bottom?
No, I don't. It just has a little probably made in China. I don't know. Whatever.
Well, what does it? What does it say on
What
the
does it
front?
say?
Hold on.
Yona. Okay. All right. Oh, tears.
Tears.
Okay.
Oh, on the I thought you meant the bottom
tears.
of the
I
cup.
thought
Yes, it says
Yes, I said Texas. Okay, enough of that. What about you?
And they're delicious, by the way.
Okay. Now tell us.
Tell us everything.
Everything?
Well, we're gonna
Yeah.
get to everything,
Oh wow!
but
I don't know
tell
if everybody's ready for everything, but all right.
Okay. All
Here's
right. All
what
right.
I can
yeah,
begin with.
tell us what you can reveal, sir. Tell
Okay.
us who you are.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Stephen Van Patten, and well, basically, my writing focus is horror and dark fiction. Started with my vampire series, Brookwater's Curse, the latest covers of which you can see right there on the wall.
Very good.
1, 2, 3. So Brookwater's Curse is about an 1860s Georgia plantation slave who becomes a vampire. And then he becomes vampire law enforcement, and his epic odyssey kind of travels far and wide, goes all the limits and craziness. There's also werewolves and shapeshifters and all other kinds of things in that story. But what makes that different from most of the other stuff out there, outside of Blade and a few other things, is that this is a big anti-hero, a big black anti-hero who's very intelligent, very compassionate, at least as compassionate as a vampire can possibly be.
Vampires have feelings too.
Yes, they do. That's right. Vampires' feelings matter. So that's that's the crux of of that trilogy. I'm also in the midst of completing a second trilogy about a hyper intelligent black woman who becomes a socially conscious serial killer. That's my Killer Genius series. That's 2 books in, about to be 3. And then on top of that, I also have a podcast, Beef, Wine, and Shenanigans. And Beef, Wine, and Shenanigans started off with fellow black horror writer Mark Abbott and Kirk Johnson, who dabbles in horror, but he's actually, believe it or not, more of a sword and sorcery fantasy guy. But his stuff is actually grounded in a lot of African mythology. So the 3 of us, we write, we have a podcast together. We eventually brought in Denise Tapscott in from California sometime after COVID, because nice to just have like a sister's voice thrown in it. She's about as big of a blurred as any one of us, so she can hang in that space very well. So yeah, it started off, we were just supposed to be talking about horror and science fiction, and then a certain ridiculous person became president, and then it kind of became a thing where we'll start talking about House of Dragons or Dracula or something along those lines, and then we get into some political stuff, and to be fair, we're also struggling with the fact that in some cases nothing that's happening in fiction is scarier than real life right now. So we're having that dialogue, it's like the stuff that we're making up versus the stuff that's actually happening, like, oh wow. So we bat that ball around quite a bit, and we have a good time. I've actually invented a game, because I'm also a frustrated game show host, so I came up with this game, Name That Racist.
Oh, very good.
I separated one round, and it's on YouTube. So for anybody who feels like looking that up, Beef, Wine, and Shenanigans, Name That Racist. And basically the way that works is, I run down some hard facts on a racist, and they have to figure out what I'm talking about. And sometimes it's a very easy answer.
Sure.
Who was a grand wizard who actually ran for president once, and that's like David Duke. Sometimes it's a little more obscure. It's like, well, who was the guy who was considered the father of modern gynecology, even though he experimented on slave women? And that's James Marion Sims. And the wild thing about it was, up until like a couple of years ago, there was like a statue of him in I want to say in Central Park. And then finally people, like women, protested, and they got the statue taken down. So yeah, there's all kinds of crazy stuff like that going on that obviously isn't covered in school. And so, it's up to guys like me to bring this kind of stuff to light
No,
when I'm not trying to write scary stories.
Well, I have two questions because I know Nanette has got I've got a million of them, but let me just backtrack. You, as I even seen in your bio, this is one of my favorite words. You have a plethora of things going on for you. But my two quick questions, because when you came in and introduced the first genre about the plantation.
Well, the vampire story.
Vampire, right. Okay, so just quickly, how does one become a vampire? And then the other is the vampire, you said policeman. Now, is he policing vampires, or is he a vampire doing police work for the humans?
No. All right, so first things first, because here's the thing, if you're going to write a vampire story, the trick there is you figure out what your mythology is going to be within your story.
Okay.
And then you have to be consistent throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how, science fiction, horror, when you got like a monster or something like that, you have to get your ground rules together and present them. Mm-hmm. And then you rock your story out that way. The way the vampires in my story work mm-hmm. is you actually have to be bitten by a male vampire and a female vampire.
Both.
You have to be bitten by both. Now, the thing is, usually what happens is, a vampire falls in love with somebody. And they're like, you know what? I'm going to rock with this person for an extended period of time. But then the other person has to come in and basically judge whether or not they can handle being a vampire.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Because let's face it, that would not be as simple as it sounds. It might not be as sexy as it seems in some movies. There is, there's a number of things that a person who is now going to live for hundreds and hundreds of years would have to sort of process. Sure. Just baseline survivor skill. Okay. So that was one of the things that I incorporated into my vampire universe. Now, when I say he was vampire law enforcement, what I mean is that the secret of vampirism has to be hidden from the human race. Of course, there are members of the human race that are in the government and they are compliant and they help out, but you need, and we use the old word constable to describe guys that do all this because their base government is actually still in England. So the constable goes out, and let's say you have a situation where a werewolf is just acting up. It's up to that constable to now go out and either kill that werewolf or do something so that the werewolf is no longer blowing the secret, if you see what I'm saying.
Okay, got you. All right. Those were burning questions, and I knew we were going to get way into all the stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now, when you pen these books that are fantastic books, by the way.
Thank you.
When you pen these books and you pen these type books, I'm a person that loves the horror book to be almost so real that I'm looking at people going, "Are you a vampire?" I want it to be real. I want the horror book. If I can tell that it can't happen, or if I have an inkling that it can happen, I'm turning the channel, closing the book. I don't want to read it. I don't want to see it because I want something that's scary enough to make me feel like the person that I thought they were, that's what they are. I wanted to be able to fit the personality. So when you came up with the concept, I know when I write my books, I come up with the concept of what I'm writing. Sometimes I do use some of the thoughts of people that have expressed thoughts, some of the actions of people that have expressed actions. Have you found yourself with situations where you go, yeah, that'll fit into a scene because I see your eyebrows going up. You've done this before, huh?
Mm,
That you know where you kind of think that it would almost touch the readers as
mhm.
well as the story.
Well, I could say that I certainly, even when I'm doing something completely fantastical, like vampires, werewolves, obviously I'm not running around with them in real life, or am I?
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
but the idea is, you borrow nuggets from other things. You don't like, see, what I don't do is I don't really mock a whole person in one
Mm-hmm.
character. I
Mm-hmm.
take different aspects of different people, and then I make a whole person in
Mm-hmm.
my story, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And mainly I do that because I don't want anybody calling me up talking about, yeah, I can't believe you told these people this, and this. And I'm like, first of
Mm-hmm.
all, how
Mm-hmm.
do like, I don't, we're not getting into all that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely something I'm very, very careful about.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, different situations require different things. And if you're plotting out a fight scene, then for the reader, that's got to come across a certain way. And sometimes I'll even go so far as to pick up a book about judo real quick, or pick up a couple of those, couple of like little action figure things, and I'll work the fight out that way and be like, oh, okay, I like that. And then I'll incorporate that into the story. Sometimes I'll stand here and I'll, because I have some like mock weapons in the house and things like that. So it's like, okay, well, maybe that and this, and maybe if he comes around the corner, like I'll do the actual physicality in either in my head or physically, and then
Mm-hmm.
put
And
that
then put it
together.
in writing and put that in writing. Now, in your Killer Genius, you spoke about a woman that
Yes,
comes in and she's um the super
she's
hero, or
incredibly
is she the
intelligent.
villain?
Well, that, you know what? Here's the thing about her. I leave that up to the reader,
Okay.
whether you want to
Okay.
be mad or not. And some
Mm-hmm.
people are mad. Some people are like, well, how does she get to be judge, jury, and executioner and blah, 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 blah? To which I'm like, well, but you like Batman, right? So,
Right. Right.
and it's like, it's basically the kind of thing where it's like, I wanted to write a story where because I mean, we've seen a few movies here and there where, you have a black woman who's, you know, basically like upset because, some guy cheated on her or something happened, and whatever. I wanted to go a little deeper than that, because when you have like a Hannibal Lecter, he's
Mm-hmm.
just a brilliant serial killer, and
Right.
he has his issues, he has his I guess you could say complaints about society, but it's not like some, it's more profound. His motivations are
Mm-hmm.
more
Mm-hmm.
um deeply rooted into something. And I wanted to do a really like flushed out, super intelligent black woman who just happens to be a serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
Because I felt like that was something that wasn't really done. It's not, you know, I just feel like it's all, anytime we do that with a black woman, it's almost handled in a stereotypical way.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So
And it's understood too, because the thing about it is, as we well know, as writers and as if you're an avid reader, we well know that the serial killer image is more than just being the typical.
yes.
A serial killer is not your typical killer.
Mm,
They have a whole different agenda and a whole different way of doing things, and
mhm,
Hmm.
it's usually on the level of them being extra intelligent,
mm,
because they stay out of the way of those that could stop them from doing what they do,
Hmm.
and they quite often get away with it for as long as they can hold on and maintain that idea.
yeah.
Yes.
So it became a series, and I need the audience, those that don't know. I mean, I know, and you know, but what's the difference between a trilogy and a series?
I guess the series goes past 3.
And that's the logical way of putting it. But a lot of people ask questions about, well, why would you say trilogy for one and series for another?
Well, it's series because it's 2 now.
Right.
So the third one is one's in the works.
Yes.
There's Killer Genius 1, she kills because she cares, and there's Killer Genius 2, Attack of the Gym Rats.
Okay.
And I saw the look on Felice's face, so I'll just volunteer this tidbit.
Please.
So basically what happens in the first book is our killer goes up against these 2 cops. One of those cops being a very intelligent Black man. And it becomes, they have and it is not a complete mock-up of the Hannibal Lecter Clarice Starling relationship. There is, it's not to give things away, but there is some sexual contact at one point in the first book, and that plus I guess like a mutual admiration thing basically means that my killer does not want anyone else but her to kill this cop. So when he, in the second book, ends up being put up against 2 Russian serial killers who happen to be brother and sister, who happen to kind of do the whole thing where you go to the bar and you like bring people home and that kind of business. Maxon, that's my detective, when he gets on their trail and then it starts to go left, then that's when the Killer Genius gets involved, and she's like, no, y'all ain't. That's my playmate.
Yeah.
And then it just turns into this whole big, like it's a lot of people dying at this point. So and the Russian mob gets involved, and it's, and she does her thing. She does her thing because she's a very resourceful killer. She kills in a lot of different ways. Like there's certain things she can make happen just by tapping away at the laptop. There's other things that she does where she actually shows up, and she's attractive, so she can
swoon them in,
put on the charm. And if you catch a man sometimes at the wrong time, sure, he'll follow a pretty woman off somewhere without any real thought to the consequences.
Is there a wrong time, Steve?
Well, there is if you're going to end up in a trunk. Yes, that would be a very wrong time.
Yeah.
But sometimes,
So you write suspense, because I don't even call that horror. That's good. That's good writing to me. That's good writing. It's good viewing. I love it. So you write suspense. You write the mystery is in it. Then you got the horrors that you do. And you got the eerie, geary, oh my God. You got all of that going on.
I do.
What else do you write?
Okay. So I mentioned my podcast friends earlier. Denise Tapscott, Mark Abbott, Kirk Johnson. We also are in the midst of doing horror anthology stuff.
Oh.
Hell at the Way Station is something that Mark and I wrote. And basically the premise of Hell at the Way Station is 2 Black horror writers walk into a bar. So the funny thing about that is the reason that happened in the first place is as members of the Horror Writers Association, the guidance is to try to get your short stories in other people's anthologies. So what happens is, when you get published and you're up, in the same book with another person that wrote another 5K word story, and you're all in a book together, then it's kind of like the idea that, high tide rises all boats, right? But at this particular time, Mark and I had experienced a certain number of rejections. So we are in a bar that used to exist, and it was actually called the Way Station. It was on Washington Avenue here in Brooklyn. And we were smashed. I have to admit, we were like higher than giraffe tits. Like we were gone, right? And he says, and it's one of those moments where, you know, guys are drinking and whatever, and it's like, we could buy this bar. You know, it was kind of like that. And he was like, you know what? We ought to just put out an anthology ourselves. And I was like, okay. And then I woke up the next morning and I was like, well, what did I agree to? What but we did it. We sat down, and some of those 5K stories that we have. Okay, let me backtrack. The way the way the book is structured, it starts with him and myself. Yes, we wrote ourselves into our own anthology. So but this is like tough guy versions of ourselves, by the way. So we walk in, and there's this bartender who kind of challenges us to tell her horror stories. And just to give you some broad strokes of that, like one of his stories really freaks people out because it's about sentient yams, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I have another story. I have a story in there where I don't know if you know what an incubus is. But an incubus, for those of you out there that don't know, an incubus is kind of a sex demon, a sex vampire, basically. They live off the sex energy of others. So in Naughty, which is a story I wrote, it's an incubus that pretends it's Santa Claus. So he gets to meet all kinds of, and so the funny thing about it is he does come with presents. He comes with, he actually has presents. He has your PlayStation, your Xbox, whatever. But if the lady of the house is, you know, in a certain way and she's up for a conversation or two, you know, things may happen.
Other gifts, huh? Okay.
Yes. You know, but and that particular story starts off with a guy that has basically had his wife taken advantage of, or at least that's what he thinks, and he is waiting for Santa Claus so he can confront him. That doesn't go quite the way he wants it.
Wonder why.
But the other funny thing about it is, the thing is, I've actually read this story publicly a couple of times. And it's also on YouTube for anybody who dares to take a look. So the funny thing is whenever this incubus Santa Claus speaks, he stays in character. So, you know, so basically his response to the questions is like, well, what do you think happened between your wife and me? Ho, ho, ho.
Right.
You know, and
knocking cookies on the table.
And it was funny because I remember at the book launch, because there's actually 2 Christmas horror stories from me in Hell at the Way Station. And the moderator / host at the event was like, okay, after finished asking Mark a couple of questions, like, okay, Steve, my first question to you, why do you hate Christmas? And I was like, I don't really hate Christmas, but you know, yeah. Anyway, we didn't get into the actual childhood trauma that produced these 2 stories.
Okay, so there was, because again.
But you use what you got. So Hell at the Way Station actually won Mark and I a couple of African American literary awards.
All right.
So that was a fun night. That was back in 2019. That was a fun night. Then we put together Hell at Brooklyn Tea, which, another establishment, more shenanigans. And then we bring in Kirk Johnson And like I said, so Kirk is a sword sorcery fantasy guy, but you know, instead of Conan, you get Mamadou, or you know, some big strapping brother that like fights dragons and you know,
right.
and
Okay.
beats the shit out of sorcerers and stuff like that, you know. And Kirk stuff is great. But he definitely added a different dimension to things because what ends up happening in the second book is Mark's character starts to drift more towards the angelic.
Ooh.
Kirk's kind of drifting in sort of this obscure but very interesting almost druid way, and there's mention of the Knights of Templar and some other very interesting things that he kind of like decided to weave into the story. And I kind of do what comes naturally to me, which is end up with fangs and glowing eyes. So that's Brooklyn T. We are working on the third installment along with Denise, who will also be introduced as a character of the same name.
Yes.
And she will have, you know, some cool supernatural powers and all that jazz. Yeah, you know, it's gonna be it's these are all very fun. There's a couple of cringy things. To Nanette's point, yes, there are some cringe moments. I can tell you the last story in Hell at the Way Station, right? Because the chat by this time, the bartender has trapped us in a basement and she's planning to feed us to a demon, and there's some other stuff. And it's like, okay, one of you might get spared, but you got to tell us a really messed up story. Now I'm just going to let you know that the title of my story in that round is called Porcelain God. And there's a lot of blood in that story. And I remember when we were first releasing the book, I'm saying to myself, because my mother, very supportive, reads my stuff, even when I don't think she should. I toyed with the idea of putting a warning in the book. The author would appreciate if his mother skipped this story. The rest of you have fun. And then just as we were about to go to print, I hear her voice in my head saying, "Well, I'm a grown woman. I can do." And getting all mad because I did that, right? So I take it out. We release the book. And then I'm actually, you know, I'm landing in Atlanta for a horror convention. And I'm getting into my hotel room and putting my stuff down. And, you know, and I'm an only child. So even though I'm 100 years old, I still have to like call in and, you know, and whatever. I landed safely, all that. So, hey, Mom, how you doing? And then she goes on to say, so I finished Way Station, and that last story, oh my God, I couldn't go to the bathroom for like 2 days. And I'm like, oh, see, Jesus.
Yes, but that wouldn't have stopped her from reading it.
I know.
It wouldn't have stopped her from reading it. And just, I'm going to put on my mom's robe and say this, because I have this lovely, beautiful daughter that is so quiet and, you know, but she watches things on TV where I'm like, how did I raise you? Because this is the total opposite. Her and her husband have been married for decades, 20 plus years. They just got a 20-year-old. They just turned 20. But she watches these things, you know, like all of the wives that kill their husbands and all of that housewives things and the married at first sight and all this. And I'm like, now, baby, this is nothing like you.
You were not raised that way.
But yeah, well, and even if you I mean,
You weren't
I
exposed to,
take the
and that
credit.
was it.
I didn't raise you like this, but
Right.
it's just not her character at all. You know.
Well, not only that, I'm going to tell you this, Felice.
Mhm.
I've met Steve, and we've been at a couple of events together, and I've watched him from a distance because the vampire writer acts different, right?
Well,
I
I
mean,
would.
that's
Where I was
what you
trying
would
to get
think.
with this whole analogy of my daughter.
He is so personable.
Mhm. Well, that's so he
If
can lure
someone
you
said to
into
me, "Well,
where
hey,
it leads to you. So.
what does he write?" I would never say he writes horror because he doesn't have that persona.
Yeah. Okay,
But
so can you speak to that, because
but
that's
when
what
he
I want to know. That by day you, except when
no,
you're
by day
writing
he's
this,
just like the vampires, Felice. By day you don't know it. It's the night. It's the night.
like
When I first saw him as his dress, I was like, wait a minute. That's not Steve.
That's a character, right? I'm really, truly, is this who you are? I mean,
and that was my next question. Did you grow up liking?
Oh,
like
I
Frank?
absolutely did. I absolutely did.
So you like that?
So I'm a Gen X. So you know, there's Gen X. Sometimes we had a lot of time to ourselves. Sometimes our parents are running around working and this and that and the other thing. So I'm gonna tell you something that I actually told them during my interview on Tamron Hall. But they cut this out. So this is kind of an exclusive. So here's the thing. So my mother worked nights. That's how, you know, she kept things going. And she would usually leave me with my stepfather. My stepfather was a drunk. So what would happen is he'd be knocked out, and then I'm sneaking off, turning on TV, and I'm watching you know, Kolchak the Night Stalker, all those old school Hammer like things with Christopher Lee, where he was Dracula, but he would say like maybe 4 words the whole movie. You know, and I mean, I also watch Video Music Box, and, you know, and all that other stuff, like, you know, like a regular kid. But you know, I always had all of that stuff as kind of a distraction, you know, because you know, being a kid in New York was kind of tough. So you know, it's like horror movie, science fiction. Every once in a while, you know, I wasn't greedy about it, but you know, every once in a while I'd sneak off, play hooky, go see Friday the 13th. I was into all that stuff. And I was, you know, I was heavily into the comic book thing. You know, so that's always been a part of my life. But the funny thing about it is, as I matured, I started to realize that Black characters, with, you know, if they're there in the first place, you know, then it becomes that usual thing, especially back in the day. It's either they're very stereotypical and everybody talks like Huggy Bear or some other craziness, or they're dead before the credits are over.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And it really got to me when the movie The Shining came out. Now, the thing is, I was kind of an advanced reader as a kid, and I was probably reading The Shining. I'm going to say maybe I was like 12 when I was reading The Shining.
My goodness.
And Interview with the Vampire and everything else like that. So, but look, I turned out just fine. Anyway, so, but you know, it's so the movie comes out, and my mother is like, "All right, well, what do you want to do for your birthday?" I'm like, "I want to go see The Shining. Can't see it because it's R, but I want to go." Now, funny thing that a lot of people, well, I want to say people should know this by now, but in the Stephen King novel The Shining, the black man that develops a telepathic rapport with the little boy, he saves the family. So And I guess if I were the adult that I am now, the cynical bastard that I am now, I would have known from Scatman Crothers getting the role that something was wrong.
Sure.
Because Scatman Crothers wasn't exactly Richard Roundtree.
Yeah.
Right.
All respect, all praise due. Love Scatman Crothers, but he wasn't the cat that you would expect to have to be able to punch a guy in the face and you know run around, get past Jack Nicholson and on and on and on. So when I'm sitting there in the movie with my mother and my aunt, and Scatman Crothers takes an axe to the chest, that's kind of a shock for all of us.
Yeah.
And you know, I could go on and on about how Hollywood wasn't ready for, you know, black dude to be the hero in that particular circumstance. And Stanley Kubrick probably being a little bit of a racist, but definitely a crazy MF because, and the funny, and I should bring this up. There is actually a whole documentary and that's about the behind the scenes of The Shining.
Of The Shining, yes.
And a lot of the talk in that documentary is about Stanley Kubrick very specifically giving Stephen King, like, you know, the FU because they were battling back and forth about casting and everything else. Like, because first of all, Stephen King didn't want Jack Nicholson. But so what ended up having a profound effect on me was, of course, the hard time that my mother and my aunt gave me all the way home. We were not very happy to see Scatman Crothers take an axe to the chest. And then that's when I started to kind of like get myself together in the head, like, you know what? There's a way to tell a horror story and give respect to the black character.
To the black character.
Yeah. Now, I have a quick. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And the only other thing I'm going to throw into that also is in the midst of, and this is also, I think, why the first thing I did was a vampire story. In the midst of coming to terms with that, then I see Blackula and scream Blackula scream.
Right.
And yes, of course, it's, you know, it came out in like 1972, 73. And these movies, of course, effects wise, I mean, come on, you know, I get it. You know, the younger generation may not be feeling it because of the effects, and you know, we're so used to CGI and you know, and the Hulk and all this other stuff. But the way William Marshall portrayed that character, Shakespearean trained black man, just all the gravitas and the dignity, everything that he brought to that. And nobody else could have done that. It's like, you know, I mean, possibly James Earl Jones if he had been interested. Right. But I mean, I just the way he handled that, the way he brought such emotion and depth to that character, and the social triggering messages that are kind of scattered throughout the movie. Particularly this one scene where he confronts these two pimps. And I'm not going to get into all of it. Those scenes, like, they stuck with me. So later on, as a, you know, somewhat pigeonholed into stage managing adult without a creative outlet, I kind of said, F it, I'm gonna make my own creative outlet. And here I am.
Very good. Now, here's my question, because in all of that. Now, do horror movies, do they scare you? Or
no?
I get that a lot. No, every once in a while, something I'll be surprised.
What movie could possibly scare you?
Right. Yeah, what scares you?
What movie scares you?
I'm trying to think of something came out recently. Okay. One of the Conjuring movies. It was one of the Conjuring movies. They did have a pretty good jump scare situation that got me. That genuinely got me. The latest version of It actually had some pretty messed up imagery. I mean, granted, you know, a lot of that comes from the technology of the time and everything else like that. But I mean, yeah, sure. I'm, you know, like I have that conversation with people all the time. Oh, was the movie scary? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, maybe,
They're
and they're like,
for me,
and then that's what I get back. It's like, oh, well, why am I asking you?
Yeah, why am I asking you? Yeah, because you create that. But just what you just said though, I think the reality in the horror pictures is what either brings me to watching it or turns me off. Because there's certain things I'm old school, so I know the Transylvania, you know, all of the terms that they used for, you know, vampire, like we said in the beginning. How did your vampire get started? Well, you said, hey, it has to be a male vampire and a female vampire in this case to turn someone. You know, we know the thing about sun up and light. You know, there's certain things that I don't think the modern day horror pictures, they want to take out all of that and add in all of the kung fu fighting and all of that other stuff and big blades and all of that. But the thing about it is, stick with the reality that they're historical spots where things have happened. You know, there are true things called ghosts. You know, there are some places that are haunted. There are some places that, so if I'm going to bring that into play with the thought of a vampire, like I said in the beginning, I'm looking around at some people, you know, going, could you possibly change after the hours? You know, what do you do? So again, my question to you is, okay, you liked it when you were younger, and you came into writing, and you came into to doing what you do, and you found a couple of friends that do the same thing.
Yes.
But where does your inspiration to say the next? You know, I know when it's time, when I get that feeling that I'm going to write another book, I get a thought that's way off from what I'm doing, and I know that that's going to be the next. Right. So where does your next come from? Does it come from you dealing with your anthology friends, or does it always come from something separate that's just Steve Van Patten?
I think it's a little mix of everything. I mean, the fact that I have these three friends, yeah, I think we kind of push each other a little bit, you know, kind of like I remember hearing the story about how Mary Shelley, the woman that came up with Frankenstein, you know, she was sitting in a room full of guys and they're just telling these stories to each other and whatever. And here it is. And that was, you know, 19th century. And she turned around and basically came up with this thing. It gets published and it blows everybody else's stuff out of the water. You know, I think if you're in the right circle of friends, you can definitely draw inspiration from that.
Right.
And I am lucky that way in that regard, that I found these other three people. And I will say the Horror Writers Association in general has helped me in a lot of ways, just in terms of.
And I never knew there was a Horror Writers Association.
You know.
I didn't either, and I had to, and I found them, you know, and now I got conventions to go to and panels to speak on, and you know, I'm out there talking about diversity.
Do they dress in character as well?
No, well, it depends on the con, and any pictures you see of me on the internet, either in whatever costuming it may be, that's usually like a Halloween party or something like that.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you're not just getting, you know, off the plane and sticking your teeth in and going into the convention then?
No, I check in the hotel first.
Wow. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. But, you know, I don't even know how you get through TSA.
Yes, sir, you got to take your teeth out.
Well,
right. You got to take your teeth out, sir. We got to check that.
So here's the thing. Denise, her day job she actually works for the airport, right?
Oh.
So one day in the group chat we had, she sends this picture of what's probably some poor soul in their coffin.
Mhm.
She sends this picture of the box, and she says, "Steve, I didn't know you was coming to California this week." And so, I mean, we have fun with it.
Yeah.
I do, when I'm at the convention, I do make a point of dressing, being a little snappy with my outfits, and things like that. And the other guys too.
Mhm.
But it's a few different things going on there. First of all, we're growing our brands
Sure.
individually and together.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're also having fun.
Yeah.
Right.
We're having
Do
fun.
you
I
find
bet
it?
you have some kind of Halloween parties.
Yes, I can imagine.
I don't so here's the thing. Halloween is also my mother's birthday.
Oh, wow.
So-
Well, we know where you are then.
Right.
Yeah.
We know where you are.
Okay. Yeah.
But then after
Yeah.
she goes to sleep, then
Well,
I,
Because again, the witching hour.
I run back home, and then
yeah,
We're-
I can imagine. I
Yeah.
can imagine. I can
Okay,
imagine.
so
Now, tell me about Laughing Black Vampire Productions.
Yeah.
well, that's my publishing company, basically.
Okay. Now,
Um,
do you only publish horror?
No. All right. So, we talked about my TV stuff a little bit. So one thing
Mhm.
that happened in my not so distant past was that I was working at MTV for about 12 years.
Mhm.
And within those 12 years, I've met a lot of very interesting people. One of them was this gentleman named Ray Munns. Ray Munns was I want to say the third and last winner of Wanna Be a VJ,
Mhm.
which was where they'd have this like nationwide thing, and they'd put these kids through all this stuff on air, and then America calls in and they pick a VJ.
Mhm.
So Ray was the third and final winner, and being completely honest, he was just a kid. He was like 19, and not everybody appreciated him, and he kind of went through some things, and I was assigned to stage manage him, and we became friends, and I kind of saw some of the stuff he was going through, and I tried to help him through that and whatever. So now we're still friends. He's no longer a VJ. He has now since moved back to the Midwest or Vegas, depending on the year of his life you're talking about. And he became an expert marijuana grower.
That's where we're getting to.
And then he comes to me one day and he says, "Hey, I maybe want to start putting a book together." And I was like, "Okay, so here's the thing. I can teach you how to do it, or you can do it just, and you can do it yourself, or I can publish it through my thing. But if I publish it, I need some scratch, I need some bread, right?" And he was like, "Oh, no, I want you to do it." I'm like, "Okay." So and he had this other gentleman, Jacob Pacino, I think that's the other guy's name. It's a little hard to remember because I haven't spoken to him in a while. So here's what happens. I put the book together, and I specifically keep it to digital because he's insisting on photos. And when you're publishing a book with photos, I'm sure you both know, then that jacks the price up a lot.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? And considering that printing companies usually, there's like a minimum amount of books that you got to put together. I didn't want to be in a situation where I print up all these books and only like 5 rosters. Right. And only 5 rosters pick the book up. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I'm not doing
We're not readers.
They got to be rosters.
So I'm not doing that. I mean, I'm just saying. So, and then what happens, which was a little frustrating, I have to admit, these two have an argument, and now they're not. So now it's the struggle to get them to market the book because they're the authors, and that's my first time as just the publisher,
Uh-huh.
right?
Right,
So
right.
it's like, so now they're not talking to each other. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. And it's like, what, okay, how did I end up with the marijuana version
With a
of the Eagle?
marijuana book.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Mhm.
It's like, now I
Right.
got to deal with all this like breakup stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. So, it still gets a hit here and there. I think the information in there is, at least from the few marijuana hardcore smokers that I have in my life, they've enjoyed them because, different rules, different states.
Mhm.
But the book is out. It was interesting because it actually debuted really high on Amazon in like the gardening section.
Sure.
Like that was like it was just a crazy 6 months of between the two of them arguing and me trying to mediate and me also saying, well, I still need a certain amount of bread. And y'all, it's like work that shit out, But
So now, do you get questions about you being the authentic person in, dealing with the book? Do people actually, look at you as doing that?
as like,
Yeah,
I'm like,
because I was looking at
like
you
I'm
as
on some
like,
Cheech and Chong shit, and
yeah,
I'm just like,
people,
but I think people know me better than that.
Oh,
I think
okay.
people know me
Okay.
better than that. So, and it's funny because then what ended up happening, there was this one, was this one interview spot that I had booked for Ray, on, and it was about marijuana and the legalizing, and can the Black community, reap some kind of reward, or what kind of, considering all these cats that have gone to jail just for trying to move a dime bag in Washington Square Park, like they wanted to talk about all that. So Ray bails last minute. And it was a legit reason. I think something was going on with his pops or whatever. So I end up taking the spot. Now the good thing, and this can segue into my Black history work overall, but the good thing is I knew enough about the history of the stigmatism of marijuana use. And I'll get into that briefly, that I was able to be of value in that interview. Now, what am I talking about? I'm just talking about the fact that there was a J. Edgar Hoover protege, a breathtakingly racist man by the name of Harry Anslinger, who, among other things, he was part of the whole propaganda machine that, basically had them, on the news with Walter Winchell. Oh yeah, the pop heads, they're gonna destroy the country. Yeah, and that's sad because that hasn't changed much over the years. But it's guys like Anslinger who really were a part of the whole thing of it being illegal in the first place. And fun fact, he is also the person that basically hounded Billie Holiday to death. Same guy. Same guy who also sent other men to date Billie Holiday. So she would end up coming in and out of, rehab and jail and all this other stuff. Yeah. He did that.
Yeah.
And he's been a question on Name That Racist.
And I was going to ask if he was a trivia.
Oh yes,
I sure was going to ask that.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Wow. So a part of the Basic Gardens thing was where you said it's growing medicinal marijuana.
Sure.
And we all look at it and say, well, what part of it is medicinal and what part isn't? And do I get the green kind, or do I get the brown kind, or do I get the and nowadays, do I get the gummy? Does the book deal with the gardening more so than the result of what usage, or does it combine both?
No, it's strictly a gardening book.
All right.
It is strictly gardening. And if I ever have the bandwidth, as the publisher, maybe because that's important.
Yeah.
What you're bringing up is actually very important. But then I've also found out that most most people that are into marijuana, they kind of already know these things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It's definitely something to think about or explore one of these days when I'm.
Yeah, well, the reason why I asked the question is I didn't want somebody to go out, get the book, and say, "Hey, I didn't see any facts in there about, if it's a gardening book, it's going to tell you how to grow.
Right.
It's not going to tell you, anything about if you smoke this twice a day,
right, or
every 6 hours, you
Mhm.
got to smoke a joint so that you can be, okay. That's
Right.
not the type of book that it is. It's
I
about
mean,
gardening and
absolutely.
growing.
I mean, granted, I know, or at least I'm somewhat aware of the fact that certain things are better for, if you're like stressed in the head. And then there's
Mhm.
other things for if you have, let's say, arthritis
Mm-hmm.
or something along those lines. I am aware of that personally. I just wouldn't necessarily talk to me first about that.
Right, right, right.
And I'm not very, and to be honest with you, I don't really smoke like that. Like every once in a while, if I'm at an industry thing and somebody hands me something, I'm like, wait, well, what's in this? Like we have a nice long, because I had a really bad edibles experience once.
Yeah.
Like bad
Yeah.
to the point where I just remember being on my hands and knees with my cat that has since passed, but with my cat staring me in the face like, you're not usually down here. What's happening? Are we all right? Like, what's good? I can't call 911, so
you need to get it together.
Get it together.
Yes.
It was the first and only time I actually saw that cat legitimately look scared. Like, because
like, come on, guy, get it together.
Like,
Yeah.
really? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on, man?
I think between animals and younger children, they will like set you straight when you don't think you're straight. It's almost like they know. They know that something is going on.
Oh, yeah.
But I want you to tell people how they can get in touch with you for your books or to talk to you in reference to your writing and other things that you do. I know your website. I put that up, Laughing
Yes.
And wait a minute. It would be less than me than to ask you, Laughing Black Vampire.
That's right.
Where did the name come from?
Well, the laughing. Well, I've been known to crack a joke or two.
Mm-hmm.
Black. Well.
Mm-hmm.
Vampire. Okay, so because of my interest in horror and everything else like that,
okay.
Everybody that I grew up with, because this was kind of like a group discussion between me and a couple of people that I had grown up with when I first decided to do this. And over the years I've had friends help me put a logo together and all this other stuff. So yeah, Laughing Black Vampire. It fits.
Okay. Now that's where they can get in touch with you for your information, and
that's one way, definitely, and that's definitely a way where you can see various things where there's actually a short film where I am actually playing a vampire that Mark Abbott, who I mentioned earlier, actually directed. There's my Black history work for the YouTube channel, Extra Credit. And there is so basically there's all of that, and you can order the books from there if you, for whatever reason, don't feel like giving Jeff Bezos any money, and because you can get my stuff on Amazon too as well. But
okay. Now, my last question for anyone that's interested: what's your next?
What's my next? My plan, at least this is what I'm working towards now, because putting out novels, like I used to be a little faster with that, but now because of the fact that now I'm getting asked to participate in horror anthologies, so I have to put time aside to write those, because again, that's what grows the brand. So I'm working on those. I'm putting out yet another vampire novel, another serial killer novel, another anthology with Mark, Kurt, Denise, and myself. So a lot of stuff is actually probably going to land next year. In the meantime, a bunch of my short horror stories are popping up in other people's anthologies. Most recently, Soul Scream Anthologine, where I wrote this one story, Coffee Break. Coffee Break is about a anchorman, a black anchorman who goes out for coffee, gets kind of caught up, and he's kind of outside when a nuclear strike hits. So, but he manages to get back to the studio just in time to give off this one last angry rant as he's dying of radiation poisoning on air.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that just came out. Yes, I have an overactive imagination. That's basically the gist of it.
But that makes everyone love you, because if we know what you bring, it's almost like comparing you to a Stephen King.
Yeah.
You know what you're going to get when you go to see a Stephen King movie, or what you're going to get if you read a Stephen King book. You know what you're going to get if you deal with a John Grisham, and you know what you're going to get when you deal with a Stephen Van Patten.
Absolutely.
And we want
to. Can I sneak one other question in there? So, speaking of movies, and just to say that I will, if I even watch them, it'll be like this the whole time because I'm a scared cat. But do you anticipate any of your novels being adapted for a movie?
I'm in some conversations. That's it's tough to say, but I've recently picked up some new advocates, and I've had a couple of meetings now, so we'll see.
Yes, yeah, we'll see. And then tell us again when your podcast airs.
We usually do a different we record a different episode at least once every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And you can find that on SoundCloud and Apple and all that other stuff. And that's Beef, Wine, and Shenanigans.
Okay.
And you can also catch me on Instagram, and that's a good place to maybe ask me, random questions like, what the hell's wrong with you? I get that a lot. So Instagram is @SVPThinks.
Okay.
And there you'll see all the crazy pictures that Nanette was talking about, and and all that other good stuff. And
tell us that again. At Instagram at
SVP Thinks, all lowercase.
Hope I got it right.
Well, let's see.
Yeah.
Hope I got it right.
Nope.
Thinks.
Like thinking. THINK.
Oh, thanks.
Thinks. Yeah.
Oh, you're not a Finks. Okay.
No, not this week. Anyway.
Okay. Let's get that right.
Let's get that right.
All right.
That's it. That's the one.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to say that this has been an update for me because I haven't seen you in a while, but I am so happy to know that you are doing well and that you have blossomed. You have blossomed. I am so happy to say that, and I appreciate it so much that you've taken your time to be with us this evening.
Oh, please. Pleasure is all mine. Honor is all mine. What can I say? I mean, the couple of times that we have hung out and at different functions, I want to say Sugar and Spice Book Club.
Yes.
Let's shout them out real quick. It's always a laugh, right? Come on.
Yeah, yes, it is. It's always a laugh. You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. So we want to tell you guys good night. And Felicia, got any last words?
Well, I want to say this was absolutely the total opposite of horrible.
All right. I guess there's a compliment in there somewhere.
Complete opposite.
Well, we just want to thank our guests for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Thank you. Good night.
It was a pleasure meeting you. Good night.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.